So, I'm gonna confess to something that I found a little bit probably likely to upset some people on here. I have scheduled a meeting with our financial advisors at this point, and I am heavily considering what Ilya will say about investing in Dollar General. I am, who is our advisor? I am very interested in what they do. I think for me, a lot of it is motivated not purely by investment, but I don't know that I'd share this with my advisors. But I do think their plan is shrill. It's suffice it to say, it's likely to pay off. It's to succeed. It's in a word, cunning. It is very exploitative. It's evil. It's wicked, but it's awesome, and it's I don't know. I mean, my general sentiments about the poor, so to speak, and rural poor folk are that it's very scattershot. Like, not necessarily all of them are going to be Republican voters, but if you look at the concentration of them that are, it's going to be quite sky high. I don't care why somebody is a Republican voter. I don't like them because they are a Republican voter. I don't care that that means I hate over like half the country. I don't care about any of that. And besides which, it's not actually half the country, because most of the country doesn't vote. You know, and you know, I don't like them. I don't like Trump's base. I don't like the people that voted for him. I don't like that group of people. And I think that nationally, most of them are going to be concentrated in some of the most lowest population parts of the United States and in rural, cities and rural counties and everything. They're going to be living out there in the sticks for the most part. And where is Dollar General, you know, building its stuff, and what is the whole issue with it, which is just Dollar General is building out there what are food deserts, and most of its stores are. Some of them are concentrated in the cities, but some of them are concentrated. Most of them seem to be concentrated in these rural, stick places where there's just no real population to speak of. It's not really, there's just nobody there for the most part. It's a town of maybe 1,000 people and everything, and it seems to me that nationally that this is like the reddest parts of the country. And what is the whole deal? Well, the thing is that if it about 4 or 5 years ago, some videos went up about how Dollar General was driving groceries out of business, and that's because groceries depend on sales of things like Pop Tarts and those dry goods and everything that are durable. Are not durable in the sense that they aren't perishable. You know, goods that get consumed, and I don't know what the term for those would be. Would they be dry goods that can be stored in a dry condition and state and everything, and the stores depend on that stuff. But that's what you find for the most part at Dollar General, and it sells at it. And it's basic consumers, just like mostly people making like less than $35,000 a year and everything. And I realize that that's kind of picking on a group of people that's of the same economic class as myself, although not as a family. My family um, bolsters my income by quite a bit. Coming from the legacy that they have. I'm not entirely poor. I've got money in the stock market. I've got disposable income, despite not bringing in a lot myself and everything. So I'm in a advantaged state for somebody not making a whole lot of money on a year basis. But when I think about Dollar General and everything, I see how they're exploiting that group of people. But I also remember that it's often rural white people that voted for Trump, the forgotten man who tried to throw a brick through the window and were united by hatred of people that tend to vote Democratic, like myself, and coastal leftist, like myself. They wanted to be cruel to us. They wanted to pwn the libs. They wanted to pwn the left, and I can see how investing in Dollar General is a way to pwn the cons, to pwn the conservatives. And it appeals to that aspect of my persona. I get to strike back. I get to take these sadistic people who decided to try to torment people like me by putting this asshole in power once again and kick this sadist in the teeth. You know, right back. And yeah, I know some of you shoplift from them. I get it. It's vulnerable, since there aren't enough staff on hand and everything in many of these locations. But overall, its stock performance seems to be up about 45% over the year, so it seems to be doing quite well. Ultimately, after 2 years of some pullback from, you know, um, for some pullback for various reasons, like the lawsuits over the low staffing situation and unpaid employees and everything, and yeah, they're embroiled in a storm of controversy and everything. And I myself, I'm gonna tell you, I think that they're very evil, and what they do is pure evil. But I love it, it would, because I don't really feel a lot of compassion for the people it fucks over. I love the way that it builds these stores in these locations, and they'll never get, it crushes hope for these communities. It smashes the light of hope from their eyes, because it means that you'll never get a full service grocery, because these stores where they happen, people shop at them, and then they don't shop at for these staples and dry goods at the actual grocery store that it depends on for to produce produce and everything. And that means that these people who have threatened us with civil war will get more fat and out of shape and everything, and essentially sabotage the right wing militias by making them increasingly out of shape and everything, so that they are unable to effectively fight in that civil war that they've been threatening. And on top of all that, like it just the economics of it are awesome. It's like it's true. What they're doing. It's so cunning. You're likely going to become richer because of it. And I love the way that it essentially enables me to claw back some of those funds that my government has been sending to prop up, these red state, these taker states. The blue states and the cities are the most productive parts of the country, and who is who are the taker states? They're almost all red. I mean, Oregon, I guess, is technically a taker state, but it doesn't take as much as some of the red states. You know, but we also have productive industries in the state. But states like California and Washington, and I believe, and a bunch of others are doing far more to the federal government than they're getting back, and are basically being forced to subsidize red staters who fucking hate us. They think we're evil, Satan worshipping, baby killers. Essentially that's the. I think the Democrats also need to wake up, because our enemies don't even see us as people. That they see us as mutant freaks fit only for killing, and that's the genuine reality of how a rural light thinks of a coastal liberal. And seeing all this and seeing how it fucks over the very people who hate people like me, and who voted to throw that brick through the window and put Trump in power. And it might not hurt the architects of it, but it definitely hurts the base of support that those architects were able to drum up and whip into a frenzy. And they need them too. They need those votes too to win elections and to dominate them. And it effectively fucks over those places. It makes it so rural America is unlikely to experience a comeback because it will never get a full service grocery store. It puts these you know, there's a collective action problem that happens because people are individually advantaged to shop for dry goods at Dollar General, even if there is a full service grocery in the area, if they have both options, because what what essentially happens is that those dry goods are cheaper at Dollar General, and eventually it drives the local grocers out of business as a result, of being able to undercut them on that sort of stuff and those sorts of goods, and those goods sustain the produce section. They sustain, the other parts of the store and everything, where food is often cheap in the produce section. But yeah, the the reality of all this, and pulling all this in, this data is not helping. The fact that people, even progressives, are crapping on it is not helping. You're giving me more and more information about it and everything, but all I'm seeing as I see it is our political enemy, our foe, who thinks of us as less than human, is hurt the most by this. It's hitting the parts of the country that most voted for Trump. You hate those people, and now you have a chance to profit off of their misery. Now, are all of these people Republicans? No, obviously, but this is political war. It's partisan warfare. And one thing that's true of all wars is that sometimes people who are innocent end up collateral damage and get caught in the crosshairs. I don't care. My well of compassion has run dry. I've got a list of stocks I'm thinking about, getting our investor, to our people to invest in. I mean, I expressed some interest about, the genomics revolution and CRISPR. I expressed Nucor Steel with disruptive technology. Yes, a disruptive technology play because the electric arc furnaces, you know, um, they're like way more energy efficient than the blast furnaces. In what they do, and we're getting increasing amounts of scrap metals, and some of these are just defensive plays to rebalance a portfolio that's a little bit too heavily leaned in the tech direction. You know, a lot of these that I picked out, some of them are just to gain exposure to real estate, and everything, in the real estate market, and begin to profit from some of that and everything. But yeah, bringing this sheet of suggestions to our advisor on Monday and everything, and Planeteer as well is something we're going to be looking in, or Palantir. I don't know how to pronounce it, anyways. But we're thinking about the data broker for the AI, revolution that's ongoing. Is something that we're thinking about pouring financial resources into and everything, and has been weighing heavily on me considering it because it's been up by so much year over year. And those are some, plays that we're looking at and into. And yeah, I definitely am ultimately interested in making some of those plays on CRISPR, these genetic editing and that sort of thing, because there is going to be like sort of a genomics revolution that's going on. I mean, it's really rather impressive, the new forms of technology that we've got. So there's got to be some money to be made there and everything, because it's just made it way cost effective to do genetic editing and that sort of thing. So that's and it makes it easier for scientists to play around with that sort of thing. So they're probably gonna come up with some cool stuff as a result and everything. And so I'm definitely intrigued by that sort of play. But yeah, I've got plans, and I know that on YouTube that since there's this whole right wing bias to the platform, this is not going to be a popular video. But fuck it,